Welcome to Paranormal Files. I'm your host, Zoe Parker, and in today's episode, we confront one of the most chilling creatures to ever emerge from the shadows of the internet, and possibly from reality itself. It watches from the darkness, haunts dreams, and vanishes before dawn. They call it the Rake. But what is it? And is it still out there? Stay tuned. The story of the Rake didn't begin in any ancient manuscript or dusty folklore text. Unlike traditional legends passed down through centuries, this one surfaced abruptly and unnervingly in the digital age. The earliest known references to the Rake appeared online in the early 2000s, tucked away in obscure forums and creepypasta threads. It was a name whispered in digital shadows, a creature without a face, until eyewitnesses began to give it one. The name Rake was first associated with a creature described as humanoid but wrong, emaciated, pale, and crouched like a beast. Its arms unnaturally long with bony fingers that could scrape the floor. It was said to have no visible eyes, yet those who saw it described the chilling sensation of being watched, sometimes for hours before it finally struck. Unlike most folklore monsters, the Rake didn't just appear once and disappear. Reports claimed it visited repeatedly, haunting the same victim night after night, often leaving them psychologically shattered or worse. As the legend grew online, users began sharing eerily similar accounts. A post from 2006 described a family in upstate New York who encountered the creature one summer night. The father awoke to find the Rake sitting at the foot of their bed, silently watching. Within moments, it scurried out of the room, but not before locking eyes with him. The next morning, the couple's daughter was found with deep scratches across her chest. She whispered only one word before falling unconscious: Rake. Digging further back, some users claim to have uncovered 19th century journal entries and ship logs referencing a similar entity: pale, crawling, and silent. One particularly disturbing passage, dated 1880, described a man losing his entire family after being stalked by what he called the Pale Skinner. The entry was found torn and bloodstained, with the final line reading, "It spoke my name last night." Whether real or fabricated, these stories planted something deep in the public consciousness. The Rake wasn't just a monster. It was an idea, a predator of the quiet hours, a watcher of sleepers. Its sudden rise in online communities sparked debates. Was this a manufactured myth, born from collective storytelling? Or had the internet simply created a space where survivors could finally speak? Even skeptics admitted one thing: there was a strange consistency in the stories. Different people, different places, same creature, a pattern was forming. And with it came a deeper fear, that the Rake wasn't just an urban legend at all. It was something much older, something that had been hiding in our blind spots all along, waiting for the digital age to give it a name. And once something has a name, it can never really be forgotten. In the next part of our journey, we'll hear the stories that made this myth impossible to ignore. First-hand encounters with a creature too horrifying to dismiss. Eyewitnesses, survivors, and those who never made it out. The first reports of the Rake were not presented as legends or tall tales. They came from ordinary people, individuals with no reason to fabricate such horrors, who recounted terrifying late-night encounters that left them permanently altered. These weren't the kind of stories told with a smirk and a flashlight under the chin. They were whispered, written in panic, often with a tone of disbelief that anything so wrong could be real. One of the earliest and most disturbing encounters came from a woman living alone in rural Alabama. She awoke around 3 a.m. to the feeling of intense pressure on her chest. When she opened her eyes, she saw it. A pale, hairless figure crouched on her chest, staring into her face with a wide, expressionless mouth. She was paralyzed, not by sleep paralysis, as doctors would later suggest, but by something deeper, a primal terror. The creature didn't speak. It simply climbed off her, walked backward into the corner of the room, and vanished into the shadows. She moved out 2 days later. Another chilling report came from a young couple in Oregon. Their dog had gone missing the night before, and they searched their property in vain. Around midnight, they heard scratching at the back door. Thinking it was their pet, the husband opened it and froze. The creature was hunched over, its spine arched unnaturally, with long arms dragging across the porch. It turned its head with a snapping motion, looked at them, and disappeared into the forest in a blur of movement that no human could match. They never found the dog. In multiple accounts, the creature is said to leave no physical trace, no footprints, no DNA, no claw marks unless it wants to. In a few rare instances, victims have found deep, surgical-like scratches on their bodies. One teenager in Pennsylvania woke up with lacerations on his chest and arms after claiming to have seen the rake in his dreams. His story was dismissed as self-harm. He insisted otherwise. Weeks later, he disappeared. Perhaps most haunting is the pattern of psychological aftermath. Survivors often experience severe insomnia, paranoia, and a sense of being watched long after the encounter. Some report hearing scratching sounds outside their window or whispers that grow louder at night. Others describe terrifying dreams, lucid nightmares, where the rake speaks directly to them, not in words, but in thoughts. And then there are the cases with no survivors at all. In 2011, a man was found dead in his bed in Indiana, eyes wide open, hands frozen in a defensive position. His wife, locked in the bathroom and hysterical, said she saw a pale, naked man crawling across the ceiling just before her husband began screaming. The police found no evidence of a break-in. The case remains unsolved. What makes these accounts so unsettling isn't just the creature itself. It's the consistency. The same features, the same paralyzing fear, the same sense of being targeted, chosen, and above all, the silence that follows. But not everyone was content to sit in the dark and wonder. Some sought answers, rational, scientific, or otherwise, and that's where the investigations began. As reports of the rake began to spread online and through word of mouth, a small but determined group of individuals decided to investigate. These weren't just thrill seekers or internet sleuths. They included amateur cryptozoologists, paranormal researchers, and even a few ex-law enforcement officers who believed something real was slipping through the cracks of conventional understanding. Initial investigations focused on known hotspots, locations where multiple sightings had occurred within a short time frame. One of the first targeted areas was a stretch of dense forest in upstate New York, near the original bedside encounter story that sparked public interest. A team spent several nights camping deep in the woods, equipped with motion detectors, trail cams, thermal imaging equipment, and audio recorders. The first few nights yielded nothing but the usual sounds of nocturnal wildlife. Then, something changed. On the third night, the team captured a high-pitched screech, unlike any animal sound they could identify. It lasted only 5 seconds, but the frequency was so sharp and unnatural that it triggered a near-instant fight-or-flight response in those who heard it. When they checked the footage from one of the trail cameras, they found a single frame, just one, where a pale, elongated figure appeared to be crouched behind a tree. The next frame showed nothing. Skeptics dismissed it as a trick of the light or digital artifacting, but those who were there weren't so sure. Meanwhile, others turned to archived police reports and hospital records. A pattern emerged. Unexplained injuries, sleep-related trauma, reports of an intruder with no face, or something inhuman seen in or around bedrooms. A retired detective from Ohio who had stumbled on the legend after his own niece had a close encounter began digging through old files. He uncovered at least 6 cases spanning a decade that matched the rake's signature. A pale figure seen at night, scratches found on victims, and no evidence of forced entry. The cases had been closed without resolution. Even more compelling were the psychological evaluations. Survivors of rake encounters often presented symptoms similar to PTSD. Some were so traumatized they refused to sleep without lights on, or at all. A psychologist who interviewed one of the victims noted that while the stories sounded delusional on the surface, the emotional responses were genuine. The fear wasn't performative. It was lived. Despite growing anecdotal evidence, no mainstream scientific organization stepped in to investigate. The subject was deemed fringe, too unprovable, too wrapped in urban legend. But that didn't stop independent researchers. One investigator in Canada set up an audio surveillance rig on his property after hearing whispers and scratching outside his cabin for 3 nights in a row. On the 4th night, he caught something. Faint, ragged breathing right next to the microphone, followed by an eerie silence. All of this built a circumstantial case. No hard proof. No body. No clear photo. But something was happening. Something intelligent. Something watching. And while investigators struggled to get answers, the theories began to flood in, from the scientific to the supernatural, each more unnerving than the last. When it comes to explaining the Rake, the theories range from the terrifyingly plausible to the wildly speculative. The creature's consistent appearance and behavior across countless unconnected sightings have led to a variety of interpretations, some grounded in science, others steeped in the paranormal. None of them, however, offer true comfort. One of the more rational theories is that the Rake is a product of mass hysteria, a phenomenon where a group of people, often unknowingly, share a delusion due to cultural exposure or psychological suggestion. With the Rake's rise to notoriety on internet forums and creepypasta communities, skeptics argue that people are simply seeing what they expect to see. In other words, the monster isn't real. Our fear is. But even this doesn't fully account for the earliest sightings, especially those that occurred before the creature gained widespread attention. Some reports, allegedly dating back to the 1800s, describe a similar entity, hairless, crouched, with long limbs and a habit of appearing at the foot of one's bed. If these accounts are genuine, then mass hysteria doesn't explain them. That's where things get stranger. Some researchers suggest that the Rake may be a type of cryptid, an undiscovered or unidentified species that thrives in the fringes of human civilization. This theory proposes that it could be a nocturnal predator, perhaps an evolutionary offshoot of humanity itself, adapted to darkness and stealth. With its gaunt appearance, large reflective eyes, and eerily silent movement, it fits the description of something adapted for a life hidden from view. But there's a problem. No remains, no DNA, no confirmed sightings by wildlife experts. Nothing solid, just fear. Then there are the psychological and neurological explanations. Sleep paralysis is often mentioned, where a person wakes up unable to move, trapped in a half-dreaming state. Sufferers frequently report shadowy figures in their rooms or sitting on their chests. Could the Rake be a collective hallucination, a cultural symbol for sleep paralysis? Maybe. But again, this doesn't explain the physical injuries, the missing animals, or the reports from people fully awake in the middle of the night. From here, the theories take a darker turn. Some believe the Rake is interdimensional, a being that slips between worlds, unseen and undetectable until it wants to be noticed. This would explain its sudden appearances, the lack of evidence, and its vanishing without a trace. Paranormal theorists argue that it's a form of entity known as a thought form, a creature brought to life by belief and fear, gaining strength as more people acknowledge it. The most extreme theory? That the Rake is a kind of demon. Not in the horned, winged sense, but as an ancient parasitic entity that feeds on fear, trauma, and pain. These theorists believe it attaches to victims, slowly unraveling their sanity, feeding off the energy created by their suffering. This would explain the recurring visits, the psychological collapse of those who've seen it, and why it seems to haunt rather than simply attack. Every explanation raises more questions than it answers. And as more sightings surface, one truth becomes impossible to deny. Something is out there and it defies everything we think we know. Despite the horrifying nature of the stories, the legend of the Rake hasn't faded. If anything, it's evolved. In recent years, reports of sightings have continued, some eerily similar to older accounts, others suggesting the creature is adapting. And as the internet continues to feed the mythos, the line between legend and reality has only grown more blurred. In 2018, a viral video emerged from a remote trail cam in Arizona. The footage showed what appeared to be a pale, humanoid figure darting across the screen in a hunched posture, its movement disturbingly fast and unnatural. Skeptics called it a prank. Others were not so sure. The way it moved, low to the ground, limbs splayed in a spider-like manner, was consistent with Rake descriptions. And while no clear face was visible, the sheer wrongness of its anatomy sparked fear, even in hardened viewers. The original uploader deleted their account 2 days later. Reddit threads, YouTube deep dives, and podcasts have all fueled the Rake's cultural presence. Urban explorers began venturing into old tunnels, forests, and abandoned homes, hoping to capture their own footage. What they often returned with were shaky clips, eerie audio, and more questions than answers. But the creature's hold on the imagination only grew stronger. In 2020, a man in British Columbia claimed that his daughter began speaking to an invisible man who came to her window each night. He thought it was an imaginary friend until he set up a camera. What he captured was deeply unsettling. A pale shape crouched low, just outside the window pane, barely visible in the reflection of her nightlight. He moved his family within the week. The Rake has also crept into pop culture. It's been featured in horror video games, short films, and even inspired new cryptids in online fiction. But not all of this attention has been casual entertainment. Paranormal researchers argue that by giving the Rake more focus, we may be giving it power, especially if it's a thought form or energy-based entity. Every story, every search, every sleepless night becomes part of its fuel. Meanwhile, a new wave of investigators has taken to tracking digital patterns, geolocation tags, timestamps, audio anomalies embedded in supposed Rake recordings. While no breakthrough has occurred, there are whisperings of a private research collective compiling global data on encounters, looking for links, perhaps even predicting patterns of appearance. There's something else, too. A growing number of people who've never seen the Rake are reporting similar dreams. A figure watching from the corner, crouched and silent. Some wake up with the sense of pressure on their chest, or scratch marks on their arms they can't explain. Whether it's psychological contagion or something far more sinister, the pattern continues. The Rake has transformed from a fringe tale to a living myth, part folklore, part shared nightmare, and possibly part truth. It's no longer a question of whether people believe. It's a question of whether it's listening and waiting. And that leads us to our final thoughts. What have we learned? And what's still hiding in the shadows? So, what do we really know about the Rake? Over the course of this episode, we followed a trail of unease that spans from early 2000s internet posts to centuries-old journal entries. We've examined first-hand encounters, explored the aftermath of psychological trauma, and reviewed the obsessive investigations that still haven't produced a single piece of conclusive evidence. We've looked at theories, scientific, paranormal, and everything in between, each offering a lens, but none delivering the clarity we crave. What stands out most is the consistency. Across time, geography, and culture, people describe the same thing: a pale, naked figure with elongated limbs, sunken eyes, or no eyes at all, and a presence that drains the air from the room. It doesn't speak, it doesn't breathe, but it watches. From corners, from ceilings, from nightmares. These details, reported independently by people with no contact or shared context, form a chilling pattern that's difficult to dismiss as coincidence. Then there's the psychological impact. Survivors of Rake encounters rarely move on. Their lives fracture, relationships break down. Some become obsessed, unable to stop searching for answers. Others withdraw completely. Even years later, the fear hasn't dulled. It lingers, just beneath the surface. The kind of fear that doesn't fade because, deep down, they believe it will come back. The investigations have yielded scattered clues: untraceable audio recordings, isolated trail cam images, and vague digital anomalies. Nothing solid. And yet, the stories keep coming. The Rake continues to appear in places far from each other: rural homes, city outskirts, forests, suburbs. Always at night, always silent, always gone before help can arrive. The cultural influence has only grown, enough turning what may have once been a purely personal terror into something collective. The creature has seeped into games, videos, stories, and online lore. It's become a meme, but a meme born from real dread. And if the theories about thought forms or belief-based entities are true, that very attention may be giving it strength. The more we look, the more likely it is to look back. Whether the Rake is an ancient predator, a glitch in our perception, a parasitic entity, or a psychological contagion, one thing is certain: it has captured the human imagination in a way that few modern legends ever do. There's something primal about it, the sense that we're not alone in the dark, that when we close our eyes, something might be there, watching, waiting. In the end, we may never find a corpse, or a footprint, or a clear photograph. The rake might not be a creature that leaves behind evidence. It may only leave behind fear. And maybe that's all it needs to exist. So, where does that leave us? After tracing the eerie timeline of the rake, from cryptic online whispers to disturbing real-world encounters, we're left with more questions than answers. But maybe that's the point. Some mysteries aren't meant to be solved. They're meant to unsettle us, to remind us how little we understand about the world we live in, and what may be hiding just outside our line of sight. There's something especially terrifying about the rake because it strips away our sense of safety in the most vulnerable place imaginable, our own bedrooms. It doesn't lurk in the wilderness or stalk you down an alley. It waits for you to fall asleep. It doesn't roar or chase. It watches. Quietly, patiently. And that silence, the absence of logic, of motive, of reason, is what makes it unforgettable. For some, it's just a creepypasta. A modern boogeyman spawned from the darkest corners of the internet. But for others, those who swear they've seen it, those who still wake up gasping in the middle of the night, it's more than fiction. It's real. And whether it's a product of fear, trauma, or something far more sinister, it's not going away. What's most chilling is that we've heard this story before. Not this exact one, but others like it. Different names, different centuries, same dread. The shadowy figure in the corner. The thing that watches you sleep. The presence you can't explain but can feel with every hair on your neck standing on end. The rake may be new in name, but not in nature. It may be an echo of something humanity has always known but never wanted to name. As we close out tonight's episode, I want you to consider something. What if the rake doesn't need to be proven to exist? What if it's already in our collective mind? An imprint in our subconscious that shows up when the world goes quiet. Maybe it's a reflection of us, of our fears, our guilt, our paranoia, or maybe, just maybe, it's something else entirely. So tonight, when you go to bed, take a look at the corner of your room. Check under the bed. Make sure the windows are locked. And if you wake up in the middle of the night and feel like something's watching you, don't open your eyes. Thanks for listening to Paranormal Files. I'm your host, Zoe Parker. If you liked this episode, don't forget to follow and subscribe on your favorite podcast platform so you never miss an episode. Share this episode with your fellow paranormal enthusiasts, and be sure to connect with us on social media for behind-the-scenes content and exclusive updates. Join us next time for another exciting journey into the world of the paranormal. If you enjoyed this episode and want to dive even deeper into the world of the paranormal, consider subscribing for exclusive access to content you won't find anywhere else. As a subscriber, you'll get unreleased episodes, episodes too shocking or controversial for mainstream platforms, members-only bonus episodes, not available anywhere else, extended director's cut versions of your favorite paranormal investigations, early access to new episodes before they're released to the public, and much more. Thank you for your support. The link is in the description below. Join now.